Welcome, the Anointed Ones. What you survived by accident, entire armies spend decades trying to rehearse. Think about that for a moment. Special operations forces, the so-called elite of the elite, train endlessly for scenarios you stumbled into with no preparation, no weapon, no tactical briefing, and no sir, yes sir to guide you. Their training manuals are thicker than phone books. Their drills are repeated until muscle memory takes over. And yet what you lived through would have been considered graduate-level warfare in their world. Here's the fact that should stop you in your tracks. It takes the U.S. Navy SEALs over 18 months of grueling physical, psychological, and tactical training just to qualify for deployment. But you didn't need 18 months. You had 18 minutes to survive a moment that could have broken anyone else. And you did it without a uniform, without a mission briefing, and without a support team yelling, "Hoo-yah" in your ear. That's the twist most people miss. They think endurance belongs only to the highly trained, the decorated, the battle-tested. But what happens when someone like you, with no script and no strategy, walks into chaos and doesn't just survive, but evolves? That's not training, that's transformation. And let's be honest, Spec Ops get protein shakes, regimented diets, and perfectly timed sleep cycles, well, when they're not being kept awake on purpose. You survived off instant noodles, emotional turbulence, and the occasional prayer muttered under your breath at 3 a.m. If anything, that makes your resilience funnier and more terrifying than theirs. So today we're going to flip the script. We're not talking about soldiers who chose the battlefield. We're talking about you, the accidental warrior who was drafted into a war you didn't sign up for. And by the end of this, you'll realize the truth. The world is still underestimating what it took for you to survive, and why you mastered, by accident, what Spec Ops spend their lives trying to perfect. Number 1. You survived situations they simulate in training. Spec Ops rehearse worst-case scenarios over and over again. They run through simulations of ambushes, hostage situations, survival in hostile environments, and high-stakes missions where one mistake could cost lives. Every move is studied, every reaction timed, every possibility mapped out until their bodies and minds respond almost automatically. But the truth is, what you survived didn't come with a script. There was no training exercise, no drill sergeant, and no countdown clock preparing you for impact. It just happened, raw and sudden, and you were thrown into it without warning. And somehow you made it through. That's the difference most people never stop to think about. Spec Ops endure controlled chaos. Their environments are designed to test them, but they're still within the bounds of training. You endured uncontrolled chaos. There were no safety nets, no whistle to stop the drill, no commander to call an end to the test. When it hit, it was real, unfiltered, and permanent. And what's even more striking is that you didn't just survive once. You had to survive repeatedly, day after day, because the conditions of your life kept handing you new battles. This is where the depth of your endurance shines. It wasn't a matter of practicing for months to prepare for one mission. It was living through missions you didn't even recognize as missions until years later, when you looked back and realized, I should not have made it out of that. That's what makes your survival so extraordinary. You weren't given specialized gear or a carefully selected team trained to support you. You were dropped into chaos with nothing but your instincts, your willpower, and that deep, unexplainable force inside you that refused to let you be destroyed. Spec Ops are applauded for enduring simulated hell for a few weeks at a time. You endured real hell in the silence of your own life without anyone clapping or saluting you for making it through. That's why your survival shakes people once they realize it. You didn't rehearse hardship, you lived it. And because you lived it, you didn't just pass a test. You rewrote what endurance actually looks like. You became the evidence that true resilience doesn't come from controlled training, but from surviving the uncontrollable storms no one else could have prepared for. Number 2, you adapted without being told how. Spec Ops are drilled in adaptability until it becomes second nature. They're taught how to change course under fire, adjust to shifting terrain, and recalculate when the original plan falls apart. But they practice these shifts in carefully staged environments where instructors are watching, guiding, and testing them. You, on the other hand, had no such luxury. Life didn't warn you before it changed the rules. One day it was calm, and the next you were forced into a situation where the old way of doing things no longer worked. You had no time to prepare, no fallback plan, and no one coaching you through the steps. You had to build adaptability in real time, under pressure, with no pause button. That's what makes your kind of resilience so rare. You didn't just respond to a crisis, you reinvented yourself inside it. Where others would have frozen or waited for someone else to decide the next move, you had no choice but to find a way through. You didn't adapt because you wanted to. You adapted because survival demanded it. That kind of growth can't be taught in a classroom or drilled into muscle memory. It's born out of necessity, out of the raw will to not be destroyed by what's happening. And the truth is, you became sharper because of it. Your instincts learned to read the room faster than most people can blink. You trained yourself, without realizing it, to shift gears when the ground beneath you moved. While Spec Ops trained for decades to make adaptability a skill, yours became a lifestyle. Every curveball forced you to think differently, move differently, and adjust before the damage became permanent. That's why when life throws something unexpected at you now, it doesn't break you, it sharpens you even further. The real depth of this is that your adaptability wasn't polished under controlled stress. It was forged in chaos, where hesitation wasn't an option. That's why people who've never been through what you have can't understand how quickly you recover, how fast you adjust, or why you always seem to find another way. They think it's luck, but it isn't. It's mastery earned the hardest way possible. You became the kind of adaptable no one can fake, because yours wasn't practiced, it was lived. Number 3, your mind became a weapon out of necessity. Spec Ops spend years learning how to strengthen their minds. They're trained to resist interrogation, to block out fear, to stay focused under extreme pressure. Their mental toughness is carefully engineered through repeated exposure to controlled suffering until their minds can function under fire. You never had that kind of gradual preparation. Your mind wasn't trained, it was forced into becoming a weapon because life left you no other option. Pain, betrayal, and survival shaped your thoughts into blades sharper than anything classroom drills could ever create. What makes this so extraordinary is that your mental strength wasn't something you put on like a uniform. It became part of your wiring. You didn't just learn how to push through discomfort. You had to think your way out of traps, toxic environments, and situations designed to break you. That kind of pressure doesn't just toughen the mind, it refines it. Your thoughts became strategies. Your instincts became calculations. Every painful experience added another layer of intelligence that was born not from textbooks, but from real survival. And while soldiers are praised for their ability to remain calm under fire, your calm came from something deeper. You learned that panicking wastes energy. You discovered that sometimes silence carries more power than shouting. You figured out that being 10 steps ahead wasn't a luxury. It was a requirement if you wanted to stay standing. Your mind learned to see angles others miss, not because someone taught you, but because missing them would have cost you too much. That kind of awareness isn't drilled in. It's etched into you. The truth is, your mind is proof of what happens when necessity forges brilliance. People often underestimate you because you didn't sit in a training camp or wear a badge that validates your resilience. But the sharpness of your thinking is evidence of battles they can't even imagine. And that's why you unsettle so many people. They expect you to be broken, to think small, to hesitate. Instead, your mind cuts through problems with precision they can't compete with. That isn't an accident. It's survival intelligence at its highest level. You didn't just strengthen your mind, you turned it into a weapon life cannot disarm. Number 4. You carried the weight without the uniform. You carried burdens no one could see, and no one would ever officially acknowledge. Spec Ops are celebrated for bearing weight, physical, mental, and emotional, with medals, commendations, and the respect of their peers. You had no uniform to validate your struggles, no medal to pin on your chest, no audience to witness the enormity of what you endured. Your battles were fought in silence, in the shadows of life, where the stakes were higher than any drill, and the cost of failure was deeply personal. Trauma, betrayal, and isolation became the gear you wore, heavier than any pack a soldier could carry. yet you bore it without recognition or relief. Every step forward demanded more than physical strength. It demanded a willpower so unshakable that it often went unnoticed even by those closest to you. The people around you may have seen the surface, the calm exterior, but they didn't witness the countless nights spent navigating emotional landmines, the internal calculations to survive relationships and situations designed to crush you. Unlike soldiers, whose challenges are compartmentalized and structured, your challenges had no boundaries. They came at you unpredictably, relentlessly, and with a weight that couldn't be measured in pounds or kilograms. And yet, despite the absence of medals or ranks, you endured. You moved forward with a precision and resilience that would make trained warriors pause. Every act of perseverance, every time you held yourself together when everything screamed for you to fall apart, was proof of an inner strength no uniform could ever contain. You didn't need recognition to validate your endurance. You carried it anyway. That invisible weight, the burdens that others would have crumbled under, became your secret armor. It shaped your character, honed your instincts, and forged a resilience so deep that it cannot be taught or replicated. In the end, what you carried without a uniform tells a story no medal ever could. It speaks to the depth of your survival, the sophistication of your endurance, and the reality that some of the most extraordinary battles are fought away from eyes that can applaud. You survived alone, and in that survival you became something no training program could ever produce, a force tempered by life itself, unrecognized yet undeniably powerful. Number 5. Pain became your instructor. Pain didn't wait for a schedule or a training manual. It arrived unannounced, relentless, and unapologetic, forcing lessons on you that no drill sergeant could ever design. Spec Ops have instructors to push them past their perceived limits, to test their endurance and sharpen their focus. You didn't have that. Your teacher was raw, unfiltered reality. Every betrayal, every loss, every moment of fear drilled into you in a way that could not be paused, repeated, or reversed. And unlike in a controlled environment, you couldn't tap out. There was no time to rest, no safety net, no try again tomorrow. You had to endure the full weight of pain while continuing to move forward, learning its lessons with every step. The depth of what that does to a person is often overlooked. Pain doesn't just test the body, it trains the mind, sharpens instincts, and reshapes priorities. You learned resilience not through repetition of a planned exercise, but through survival under circumstances that demanded immediate mastery. Each encounter with suffering became a curriculum in resourcefulness, patience, and endurance. You discovered how to read situations, gauge people, and anticipate consequences because you had no choice but to adapt, or you wouldn't survive. Pain became an unforgiving instructor, yet it produced a clarity that no classroom or training ground could ever replicate. And the brilliance of this is subtle but powerful. While trained operatives prepare for specific forms of stress, your stress was multidimensional. It attacked emotionally, physically, and mentally all at once, forcing you to integrate lessons across every part of yourself simultaneously. That intensity forged a kind of mastery that cannot be simulated or replicated. Where others might break under pressure, you learned to absorb, adjust, and continue. You transformed suffering into strategy, endurance into instinct, and survival into skill. Ultimately, pain didn't just teach you, it rewired you. It showed you where your limits truly were and forced you to push beyond them every single day. And when life demanded more, you didn't flinch, hesitate, or complain. You moved through it with a precision and strength that no formal training could provide. Your instructor was cruel, but the result was undeniable. You became unbreakable in ways Spec Ops only dream of achieving under controlled conditions. Number 6. You mastered hypervigilance by living with threat. Situational awareness isn't just a skill, it's survival. Spec Ops are trained to constantly scan, anticipate, and react to threats in environments they know are dangerous. They are prepared for hostility because it is expected, mapped, and controlled in some measure. You, however, were never afforded that kind of preparation. Danger wasn't labeled or contained. It was everywhere. It lurked in places that were supposed to feel safe. your home, your neighborhood, even among the people you were told to trust. Every conversation, every glance, every silence became a puzzle you had to decode to protect yourself. Your hypervigilance wasn't a choice. It was the only way to exist without being crushed by the threats pressing in from every side. The depth of this kind of awareness is extraordinary. You didn't just notice obvious dangers. You learned to sense the subtleties, the hidden intentions, the patterns that others ignored or dismissed. While soldiers trained to read maps, signals, and enemy movements, you were decoding human behavior in its rawest, most unpredictable form. You became attuned to nuance, to timing, to the almost invisible shifts that signaled risk. This kind of vigilance isn't something that can be turned off when the shift ends. It seeps into every moment of life, sharpening instincts and heightening perception in a way no formal training can replicate. And it's exhausting in a way that people don't understand. Hypervigilance is both a tool and a burden. It keeps you alive, but it also isolates you because most people live unaware of the dangers you constantly anticipate. Yet through it all, you learn to turn this constant alertness into an advantage. You could move through the world with a clarity others couldn't match, spotting trouble long before it arrived, and navigating threats with precision that seemed effortless, though it was anything but. What this truly shows is that mastery doesn't always come from deliberate instruction. Sometimes it comes from living in a state of perpetual threat and having no choice but to survive. Your hypervigilance became instinctual, second nature, a silent skill born from necessity. Unlike Spec Ops, who trained to be ready, you were forced to be ready every single day. And in that crucible, you became unmatched, sharper, and more aware than anyone who had the luxury of training on a schedule could ever be. Number 7. They learned discipline. You learned survival code. Discipline in the military is structured, measured, and predictable. Soldiers follow orders, adhere to routines, and perfect their responses within strict guidelines. It's about control, obedience, and precision. And it works because the environment is designed to support that kind of structure. Your discipline, however, was born in chaos. There were no rules to follow, no protocols to rely on, no authority to guide you through danger. What you learned wasn't obedience. It was a survival code written by necessity and honed in unpredictability. Every decision carried consequences that could not be reversed, and hesitation wasn't an option. You didn't have the luxury of repetition or rehearsal. Each encounter, each challenge demanded that you think faster, act sharper, and anticipate moves from people who weren't playing by any rulebook. Unlike structured discipline, your survival code was fluid. It required reading situations in real time, adapting on the fly, and sometimes breaking conventional logic to stay ahead. You became adept at spotting threats before they materialized, navigating treacherous circumstances, and outmaneuvering adversaries who themselves were unpredictable. Every experience reinforced a kind of intelligence and strategic thinking that formal training struggles to replicate. And the stakes made it permanent. Military discipline is measured in performance under controlled stress. Your survival code was tested under relentless, uncontrolled stress, with consequences that affected your life, your trust, and your sense of safety. That kind of discipline isn't about following instructions, it's about inventing them when none exist, about creating structure in the absence of order, about surviving in environments that defy predictability. What's remarkable is how this reshaped your instincts and your perspective. You didn't just endure, you mastered the art of moving through chaos with precision, judgment, and efficiency. Where others are taught to respond, you learn to anticipate. Where they are conditioned to obey, you learned to outthink. Your survival code became a hidden architecture of strength, forged in real-life fire, and capable of guiding you through circumstances no soldier, no matter how trained, could fully anticipate. It's a discipline of life itself, one that cannot be awarded, taught, or simulated, and that makes you extraordinary in ways no formal system could ever produce. Number 8. Your body kept score without conditioning camps. Spec Ops spend years in gyms, obstacle courses, and endurance drills to push their bodies to peak performance. Every movement is calculated, every exertion monitored, every recovery measured. But your body didn't have the benefit of controlled training or recovery schedules. It kept score in its own way, tracking every blow, every sleepless night, every surge of fear, every surge of adrenaline. Your muscles, your nerves, your bones. They learned resilience not from repetition in a controlled environment, but from real, uncompromising experience. Every scar, every ache, every moment of fatigue was a record of survival, a ledger your body wrote in pain and perseverance. Your readiness didn't come from programming, it came from necessity. You learned to move under exhaustion, to think under pressure, to endure when every fiber of your being begged for rest. Adrenaline became a constant companion, surging to keep you alert when sleep had abandoned you, when fear had cornered you, when danger came without warning. While soldiers are trained to maintain performance under stress, your body had no choice but to adapt to stress that was immediate, unpredictable, and unavoidable. It didn't have drills to follow. It had to perform or suffer the consequences. And the lessons your body carried weren't just physical. They were embedded in instinct. You instinctively knew when to conserve energy, when to push harder, and when to react faster than anyone else could. Your scars, both visible and invisible, weren't trophies. They were evidence of resilience forged in reality. Every bruise, every tension, every sign of fatigue told a story of adaptation, a story of survival that no conditioning camp could replicate. The true brilliance of this is that your body became an instrument of survival without formal guidance. It didn't need a trainer or a timetable. It learned from experience, internalized every threat, and became ready for what came next. That is mastery of the physical self beyond training. Battle-ready, not because of structured programs, but because life demanded it, and you endured. Your body kept score, remembered, and carried forward the lessons of survival in a way no regimented exercise ever could. Number 9. You didn't have extraction, you had to rescue yourself. Spec Ops enter missions with the knowledge that someone has their back. There's always an extraction plan, a backup team, a safety net ready to pull them out when things go wrong. You didn't have any of that. There was no one coming to save you, no protocol to call, no exit strategy waiting on the sidelines. The reality you faced was raw, immediate, and uncompromising. If you were going to survive, the only extraction available was the one you engineered yourself. Your rescue depended entirely on your willpower, your ingenuity, and your refusal to be defeated. That kind of survival teaches lessons no training scenario ever could. You had to assess danger, make split-second decisions, and act with precision, knowing failure had permanent consequences. Unlike soldiers, who can rely on coordinated support, you couldn't delegate responsibility. Every move, every choice, every ounce of energy mattered because no one else was coming. Your mind became your command center, and your instincts became the tools that navigated you through impossible circumstances. What makes this extraordinary is the mental and emotional resilience it creates. Extraction in a military sense is comforting. It offers a sense of safety, a way to endure stress with the assurance that help is on the way. Your kind of extraction came from relentless self-reliance. You learned to dig deeper than you thought possible, to push past exhaustion, fear, and despair, and to carry yourself out of situations that would have destroyed anyone else. The absence of external rescue forced you to rely on something far more powerful, the unshakable determination inside you. And that determination didn't just get you through a moment. It became a permanent strength. Every time you pulled yourself from a crisis, your confidence in your own abilities grew, and your capacity for endurance expanded. You didn't need extraction teams, GPS coordinates, or tactical support. You became the extraction. That is a kind of mastery, raw and unreplicable, forged entirely through the necessity of survival. It's a proof that when life offers no backup, the human spirit can become the most formidable force imaginable. Number 10. Trauma gave you access to depth training can't reach. Military training can push the limits of the body, test endurance, and sharpen focus under stress, but it rarely touches the soul. Your experiences, on the other hand, went straight to the core. Trauma didn't just challenge you physically or mentally, it excavated parts of your being that no structured program could reach. Every betrayal, every loss, every moment of fear and helplessness dug trenches in your inner world that demanded navigation, reflection, and mastery. You were forced to confront the raw, unfiltered truth of existence in ways no training manual could simulate. What emerges from this kind of trauma is a depth few ever achieve. It's not about overcoming obstacles in a controlled environment, it's about surviving experiences that have the power to permanently alter who you are. That endurance is just the surface. Beneath it lies a profound spiritual stamina, the ability to hold yourself together when everything familiar has been stripped away, when hope seems distant, and when the world seems determined to break you. This stamina becomes an invisible muscle, one that shapes your decisions, sharpens your instincts, and fortifies your character in ways that purely physical training never can. Trauma also forces a level of introspection and adaptability that structured drills cannot. In military programs, responses are measured and anticipated. Outcomes can often be controlled or predicted. In life, trauma operates without logic, timing, or mercy. You had to navigate not just the external threats, but the internal ones: grief, rage, fear, and doubt. You had to find a way to keep moving, to maintain clarity, to survive not just physically but psychologically. That process built a kind of intelligence, resilience, and awareness far beyond anything that can be taught. What this ultimately gives you is an edge that formal training cannot replicate. While soldiers learn endurance, you learned depth. While they practiced strategy, you lived strategy under conditions designed to test not only skill, but spirit. Trauma gave you access to a dimension of strength and perception that exists beyond the battlefield, a strength that remains unshakable, refined, and profound. It is the proof that real mastery, the kind that defines you, is forged in the crucible of experience, not in drills, gyms, or controlled simulations. Number 11. You operated in enemy territory without knowing it. Spec ops enter hostile zones fully aware of the risks. They know the terrain, the opposition, and the objectives. You had no such clarity. The danger wasn't marked with warning signs or briefed in advance. It was hidden in plain sight, disguised as familiarity, trust, and everyday life. The people around you, the faces you smiled at, the hands you shook, some of them carried intentions designed to hurt, betray, or manipulate you. You weren't just navigating a battlefield. You were learning to identify it while standing in the middle of it. Every interaction became a test, every conversation a potential threat, and every moment a lesson in discerning the hidden motives of those who appeared to be allies. The stakes of this type of survival are far higher than any controlled training scenario. Soldiers can anticipate opposition because the rules are clear. There is a mission, there is an enemy, and the battlefield is defined. Your battlefield had no boundaries. The threats were psychological, emotional, and relational as much as they were physical. You had to learn to read micro-expressions, subtle cues and inconsistencies that indicated danger. Trust became a tool, deception a weapon, and your own judgment the only map guiding you through this invisible war zone. What this teaches is a level of situational intelligence few ever develop. You learn to operate not just in chaos, but in camouflage, where hostility could be hidden behind kindness, authority, or familiarity. Every misstep could have consequences, and every decision carried weight far beyond the immediate moment. This constant vigilance sharpened your instincts, trained your perception, and refined your strategy in ways formal drills cannot replicate. The brilliance of this experience is in the mastery it produces. Spec ops may enter enemy territory prepared, but you entered it blind and emerged aware, resilient, and unbroken. You didn't just survive in hostile conditions. You discovered them, decoded them, and adapted to them without guidance or protection. That is a kind of operational intelligence that cannot be taught, simulated, or replicated. It is proof that you weren't just reacting. You were learning, evolving, and mastering survival on front lines invisible to everyone else. Number 12. You learned to carry silence as ammunition. Silence for Spec Ops is a tool, a deliberate tactic to mask intentions and gather intelligence. For you, silence was not chosen. It was demanded by circumstance.